Thank you.
Here we go.
In 5, 4, 3, cameras. All right. Am I on?
You're on.
Okay, great. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. I don't know how many people are here. I hear there are some people, so that's great.
19.
And I want to respect everyone's time tonight and get started more or less on time. So let me just introduce myself. My name is Alaric Bien, and I'm with the City of Redmond in Human Services, and I'll be doing the presentation tonight. And if you have any questions, we're putting them in the chat. And one of my colleagues will help and read them out at the end of the presentation. But before we start with that, why don't we do some introductions? We have a number of city staff from throughout King County. We are the 16 City Human Services Funders Collaborative. And so maybe you can put some names to faces and cities. So I'm going to kick it off to Didi Catalano. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Alaric. My name is Didi Catalano. I work for the City of Bellevue, and I am the Human Services Grants Coordinator for the city. I will now pass it on to Monica.
Thank you, Didi. Good evening, everyone. My name is Monica Negrilla. I'm the Human Services Manager here at the City of Issaquah, and I will be your contact for the grants. And for that, after that, I will pass it on to Rita from Sammamish.
Thank you, Monica. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rita Bard. I'm from the City of Sammamish Human Services, and welcome everyone this evening. And I'm going to pass this now on to, let's see, Leslie.
Hi there, my name is Leslie Miller. I lead the Human Services team at the City of Kirkland and will be the main contact for 23-24 grants. And I will pass it on to Lori.
Lori, you might be muted. No? You want to call on someone else, Leslie?
Stacy.
Okay, Stacy.
Hi, everyone. Stacy Hansen, City of Tukwila Human Services, and I will be your contact for any questions regarding Tukwila and the grant. And I'm going to stick with South King County and choose my neighbor, Colleen.
Thanks, Stacy. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Colleen Brandt-Sluter, Human Services for the City of Burien. And I'll be your contact for any questions regarding grant making for our city. And I'll call on Lori Guilfoyle next.
Oh, I think she couldn't get on. Oh, there she is.
Hi, sorry, my computer decided to restart laptop. So hi, Lori Guilfoyle, City of Kent, and I will be your contact if you have questions for Kent. I apologize, I don't know who hasn't gone yet. Alex.
Hi, I'm Alex O'Reilly. I'm the Human Services Manager for the City of Bellevue. Welcome, everyone. And for your contact for all grant questions, it will be Didi Catalano, who was introduced first this evening. Thank you.
And is there anyone else who hasn't gone, Alex?
I can jump in.
Joy Scott. Yes, I was going to introduce Joy Scott. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joy. I'm with the City of Auburn. I'm our Community Services Manager. My pronouns are she, her, and I will pass it on to Kyla. Either of us are great contacts if you have questions for grants and programs, but I think that Kyla is often able to respond more quickly than I can. So maybe start with her if you have questions on the grant process.
Hi, everyone. I am Kyla Wright, City of Auburn Human Services. Happy to answer questions for the City of Auburn. And I will pass to Diane.
Hi, everybody. Diane Utek, City of Renton Human Services, and I'm happy to answer questions for Renton. And I think we're now through the list.
Okay, did we miss anybody? If we did.
So,
speak up now.
Alec, Brittany Julia not able to join, but she's with Federal Way, and so she wanted everybody to know that she's on the line and will be on point for Federal Way.
Great. And that was Brooke Buckingham, my colleague here at the City of Redmond, but don't bother her, bother me. I'm your contact. You can bother her too. She's good to ask. Okay. Thank you, everyone. And let's just get started. We're gonna tonight talk about, there we go, what we fund as human services departments at the cities, the minimum requirements for agencies to be able to apply for funding. We'll talk a little bit about the application, data collection, timelines for the application, and then at the end there will be some slides with the city contacts. Before you freak out, this session is being recorded, so if I talk too fast or I mumble, you can't hear it, don't worry, it'll be recorded, and we will be posting this PowerPoint on the website, which is shareoneapp.org. And I'll share that link with you later on. Okay, so what we fund. So we have a number of funding areas, but really each city establishes their own funding priorities. And when the application opens, you should refer to the city supplemental information sheets that will be on the website as well to see each city what they're really focusing on for that particular, for the next biennium, the next 2 years. And so not in any particular order of importance, we have programs in basic needs, food and shelter, things like homeless shelters for single adults, youth and families, food banks, Meals on Wheels, financial assistance for eviction prevention. And we have programs that help with supportive relationships. So things like youth mentoring, after school programs, information and assistance for special populations, legal services. And we have safe haven type of programs, domestic violence services, anti-bullying programs, hate crimes prevention. And there's healthcare programs, physical and behavioral health and treatment and prevention. And the last area is education and job skills. So employment training, adult education, ESL, and also childcare subsidies so that people can go to work or go to school. So those are just some examples of programs that get funded by human service departments in the different cities. And what we don't fund religious activities, but faith-based organizations, they can receive city grants if the money isn't used to fund religious worship or instruction or proselytization. We do not fund political activities. And generally, we don't fund one-time events like cultural celebrations and things like that. But if you have an idea in mind and you're not sure, please contact the city staff because there may be ways of packaging it or of thinking about it to be able to fit what the city is really looking for. So in general, no one-time events, but again, talk to your city staff, contact people. So some minimum requirements, what you have to have even before you can qualify for funding. You need to, in general, and this does vary city by city, but in general, you have to be a nonprofit, a bona fide nonprofit with a 501c3 status from the IRS. Some cities require that you have this status at the time of application, some of them when the application is submitted, and some of them at the time of contracting, and it's kind of confusing. So we have a handy dandy chart on the website that says minimum requirements, and it has all the 16 cities and what the requirements are in terms of nonprofit status. If you're not a nonprofit, many cities also allow fiscal sponsorship via another nonprofit. And in addition, Bellevue, this is new, this next cycle, they will accept applications from some for-profit entities under certain circumstances. And if you're not sure, please contact the city staff, Dee Dee, whom you met just a minute ago. For information on how to get nonprofit status, you can contact Communities Rise, which is a capacity building organization, and we'll talk about them a little bit more later on. Or you can just go to the IRS website. I Googled how to apply for nonprofit status, and I got right there. It's kind of a involved process, and it does take time. You can't just submit the application and it happens right away. So if you don't have nonprofit status yet, you might want to think about applying, or at the very least finding a fiscal sponsor. Business licenses are required to do business in many cities, but again, not all. So go check that chart to see what each city's requirement is. In terms of insurance, we all do require insurance from agencies that we contract with. So general liability, professional liability, automobile, stopgap insurance, employer's insurance, and workers' comp. Not all cities require all forms of insurance. Again, it's on that chart, and their insurance minimums may vary by city as well. Financial audits. This is a requirement based on the revised code of Washington, and on that chart, it actually has a link that goes to the specific RCW. It's 19.09.541. But in a nutshell, agencies with an annual budgets over $3 million are required to get an annual independent third-party audit of your financial records. And organizations with annual budgets between $1 and $3 million are required to either file a 990 annually or obtain an independent third-party audit. And if you are a smaller organization with a budget under 1 million, you are required to, at minimum, have your financial statements reviewed annually. So some other things you need. Now, these are policies that, well, let me start with the non-discrimination policy. Should you have a contract with a city, when we do monitoring of your program, that's one of the requirements, that you have a non-discrimination policy. Some cities, again, refer to that chart, some cities require that you already have the non-discrimination policy when you apply. The other two, internal controls policy and records retention policy, are not required at the time of application, but when we come out to monitor you, we will need to see those. The other things, again, not required when you apply, but these are based on federal law. So if you are already a nonprofit, you should have these. You should have these policies, because otherwise you're out of compliance. So the first one is the whistleblower policy, and the second one is the conflict of interest policy. And these are both required by the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002. And also in that act, which was mostly around the Enron corporate governance things, but the third piece that affects nonprofits is that you're required to have an independent audit committee, which can also be your finance committee, but you have to have a designated audit committee. Some other requirements: you have to be able to accept reimbursements for funds quarterly. So what this means is that we cannot, as government entities, prepay for services. Unfortunately, you have to provide services first and then submit a reimbursement request, and then we pay you for services that you've already provided. Usually this is done on a quarterly basis, but under certain circumstances, some cities may allow slightly more frequent reimbursements if it's an issue. So again, talk to the city staff that you are planning to work with. You also need to be able to track and submit all of the required reports and the reimbursement request online. We have gone to an all online system, and we hope that it's easier because you fill out one report for all the cities that you get funded from for that particular program, one reimbursement request for all the cities, and then you upload it, and then we on the other end can download and look at our particular city. So, but you do need to have the capacity and ability to do that online. And there are reporting instructions and invoicing instructions on the ShareOne app website as well. We very, very strongly encourage you to meet with city staff before you submit your application. This is both for us to get to know you and you to get to know us, and we're not scary people. We really want to help organizations be successful, but also to talk about your program so that we have a better understanding and may be able to help you kind of to frame your program in terms that that the reviewers of the application would most likely be able to understand. So definitely reach out to city staff before you apply. Like if you're even thinking about it, reach out tomorrow morning and set up appointments with us, because we do love to meet with folks before we see the application. Accounting practices. You are required to follow generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP principles. And if there are any accountants among you, you know what that means. I don't know exactly what it means, but it's a standard thing in finance. And then there are some other city-specific requirements, such as they may have a minimum request amount, like they'll only entertain applications that request $5,000 or more, or $1,000 or more, something like that. And any other requirements, you will find that on the city supplemental information sheets, which again will be posted at the shareoneapp.org website when the application opens. So each city will have their own supplemental sheet, and you should look at and read carefully each city's different sheet because they are all different. Okay. So some resources, if you need examples or sample policies, you can go to the National Council of Nonprofits. Board Source is a good source, and Blue Avocado. And you can just Google these. And for, we talked about getting nonprofit status. Communities Rise is a good organization to work with. And they've worked with a lot of smaller organizations and helped them get their nonprofit status, help them get organized, and they are at communities-rise.org. And the last thing is, and I just realized that we had done this 2 years ago for Eastside agencies, and so I just realized that I don't have a South County link, but the Alliance of Eastside Agencies is a group of Eastside Human Services Agencies. It's a membership organization. If you're on the East Side, you should join. Up in North County, it's NUSHA, the North Urban Human Services Alliance, and South County, I can't remember. So if anyone can help me out, it used to be the South King Council of Human
Services. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
South King Council of Human Services. You can Google them. I will add those. I'll add their logos into this slide before this gets posted to the website. So they are a really good place to go to meet other nonprofit organizations. And honestly, I used to be an executive director, and I have borrowed a lot of policies from my colleagues because they already did it and their attorneys already looked at it. And rather than starting from scratch, we just share. And people, I think, are generally very happy to do that if you're nice. Okay, so what exactly is in the application? So there's one part that's the narrative, and that contains the program description. And in that section, you would talk about what the issue is what is the need that you're addressing, and try to be really specific and try to be concise, because I know in Redmond, we get 90, 95 different applications, and it's a lot to read, and we have volunteers reviewing them. It's a lot of work. They love doing it. And the more specific and concise you can be, the better. It just leaves a better impression. And you want to talk about both the need and also what services you're going to provide to address that need. You'll explain who you're going to serve and how they'll know about your program, and also what difference will it make. So that's all in the program description. If you're a brand new organization, there's another piece of it that's the agency profile. That's the place where you talk about all the things that your agency does. But in the program application, it's just this one specific program. So don't get those too confused, because they can be different. Other information that we'll ask about is accessibility, both, well, financial accessibility. Do you offer sliding fee scales or free or reduced services for, you know, folks? Are you ADA accessible at your site? How accessible are you with public transportation? Are you on a bus line, or do you have to like Uber 15 minutes to get to your office? What are your hours? Standard, you know, I don't know, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, or do you offer evening hours, weekend hours? How flexible are you around that? How accessible are you in terms of language and culture? If somebody comes to your service, to your program for services, and English is not their first language, or maybe the English is fine, but they're from a totally different culture, how do you handle that and make your services accessible to them and make them feel welcome? There's a section where you will input the numbers for your program budget, not the agency budget, but the program budget. And then also you'll talk about the outcome. So this is the how do you know that what you're doing is really making a difference? So, you know, it could be things like, you know, X percent, you know, 60% of all of our program participant reported improved mental health in the, you know, first 30 days after treatment, or, you know, families reported, well, and we always ask for a percentage, so you need to put it in a percentage format. Let's say 80% of families who accessed our food bank reported that they did not have to run out of food at the end of every month for 6 months straight, or something like that. So those are some examples of outcomes. If you have questions, again, I suggest that you talk to city staff, because they can help you figure out what would make sense. And the other piece is data. We ask for lots of data. We are city people. We don't love data, but we need to ask for it. And, you know, we would love to be able to have a relationship with all of our providers and, you know, know them well enough so that we could just give them money. But unfortunately, we also have to be accountable to our taxpayers. And so we need to be able to show that the money is being well spent. We need to know how many people that you're serving, what services you're providing, and also, you know, are you doing what you are contracted to do? In the application, you will be reporting, you know, some of the data is how many residents you've served in each city by city. So again, it's one kind of spreadsheet, and it has all the 16 different cities. And let's say that you provide services on the east side and you've served Bellevue, Kirkland, and Redmond residents, then we would ask for 2021, which is this year, how many residents you've served in each city. And then for 2022, how many you project for each city. Because even though we have one funding application with just one joint process, the funds come from each city. And so we'll contract with you for different amounts of service. And then in the application, you'll also talk about the specific services to be provided. So for example, we're gonna give one-on-one mental health counseling, or we're going to provide supplemental food or emergency shelter for people experiencing homelessness. And so you'll be asked how many service units you'll provide. So what's a service unit? It's like counting widgets in a factory, and that's what we are looking for when we pay out for the reimbursement. So, for example, if you're doing mental health services, then you might be counting the number of 50-minute hours, the number of clinical hours that of counseling that you're provided over the course of a year. If you're a food bank, maybe it's, we will provide 500 bags of food to the community. Or if you're a homeless shelter, maybe it's bed nights of shelter, something like that. The other place where you'll have lots of data reporting is with the quarterly reports. And before I mentioned that, the reimbursement request that happens every quarter, it's all in one Excel spreadsheet. So there's just one thing that you fill out. There's lots of different sheets, but it's one, what do you call it? A workbook? A workbook with multiple pages. And so reimbursement request is one of them, but also we're going to ask about the service units, the hours of counseling or the bags of food that you've provided that quarter. And also how many unduplicated residents that you've served that quarter. And these numbers are all by city. So it might be that, I have contracts with Bellevue, Kirkland, and Redmond, and Bellevue's paying for 100 units of service over the course of a year. Redmond's only paying for 50, and Kirkland's paying for 50, let's say. And so you would report on each of the city lines how much service you've provided to each of those cities, and we'd expect about a quarter of the annual total each quarter. Besides quarterly reports, there are also annual reports, more numbers, more data, and you really need to start collecting data from the beginning of your contract because the reports aren't due until, well, January 15th of the following year. But if you haven't been collecting data since January 1st of this year, you won't have numbers to report and you'll get in trouble. So some of the things that you'll report on are demographics, so unduplicated households and individuals, their income levels, age, gender, race, and ethnicity. And the other annual report is the program outcomes. And this, again, comes from it'll be in your contract along with the service units, what you're promising to provide to each city. And so it would be, 70% of the clients that we served reported improvement in mental health after 30 days of treatment, something like that. And don't forget, it's really important in the application, you'll have to explain to us how you're going to collect this information. You can't just make it up, unfortunately, but maybe you send out a survey every quarter or you do a phone survey or something like that. How are you going to know that 70% of the people you served actually improved after 30 days or 90 days or whatever you decide a reasonable outcome is for that particular service? Okay, timeline. The request for proposals, the RFP will be released in early March of next year, and the applications will be due 4 weeks later. And the applications are reviewed through the summer either by volunteer human services commissions or city staff or sometimes electeds, and it just depends on each city. If you want to know how each city does it, please contact the city staff. Then recommendations get made to city councils in the fall, and city budgets are passed usually by the end of November or early December. And then we notify the awardees. Congratulations, and January 1st, you start your program, you start your contract. So who should you contact if you have questions? On the north end, Anastasia Warhol for Kenmore, Bethany Wilbrecht-Dunn for Shoreline. And again, if you go to the shareoneapp.org/help, there's a list you can pull. There's a link for the list of city staff. In the east, Didi Catalano for Bellevue, whom you met, Monica Negrilla Issaquah, Leslie Miller from Kirkland, me from Redmond, and Rita Bod from Sammamish. In the South End, we have Joy Scott, and she said also Kayla in Auburn, and they're both on the list. Colleen Branch-Luter for Burien, Julie Johnson for Covington, Nicole Nordham for Des Moines, Sarah Bridgeford or Brittany Julius for Federal Way. And there are a lot of cities in the South. Lori Guilfoyle for Kent, Diane Utek for Renton, Larry Ellis for SeaTac, and Stacy Hansen for Tequila. Sorry, Stacy, you're always last because you're T. You're at the end of the list, but not the least important. Okay, now it's time for questions. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat and my colleague will read them out and I'll try to answer them, or one of the other staff. Brooke, do we have any questions?
So we did have one question I responded via chat, but I just wanted to let everybody know that this presentation will be posted on the website, www.shareoneup.org, and that's 1, the numeric number. And the next question that is posted in the chat is, are community colleges eligible?
So, Bellevue, would you like to answer that question?
Yes, hello, I unmute myself here. Yes, we fund some programs through Bellevue College, which used to be Bellevue Community College. So depending on the program and the specifics, that could be an eligible program.
And does anybody fund Highline or Green River or what's the one over in Shoreline? Shoreline Community College.
Community College.
So I'm not sure. I'm assuming that they might fund. If you have a question, please contact that city staff person.
Monica had her.
Valerie, can I jump in? I was trying to find a way to raise my hand, but I couldn't find it out. This is Monica from Issaquah, and actually we did have a situation from a community college since and this is just for the city of Issaquah, and we would be happy to connect with you. We do fund programs for certain community colleges, but it is through their 501c3 organization. For example, we fund the Issaquah Schools Foundation, which is the nonprofit for the Schools Foundation in Issaquah, and the same we fund through the nonprofit of Bellevue College certain programs. So they have to have the nonprofit designation. Just saying that, but if you have specific questions, we would love to sit down and discuss them.
Great, thank you.
Brittany Julius from Federal Way indicated that they do provide funding for Highline.
Okay, great. So Federal Way does fund community college programs. Some. Okay.
So the next question is, do you use one application to apply to all cities at once, or must you apply individually to each?
Great question. So there is one application to all 16 cities, and you check off which boxes that you're asking money from for each program. That's the catch. So if you're an agency with multiple programs, let's say you have a food bank services, so you would make one application for the food bank program, and let's say you have an after-school program, that's a separate application, and you may or may not be applying to the same cities for those programs. It depends, but each program has one application, regardless of how many cities, whether it's 1 or 16. Great question.
The next question is, there a maximum amount that can be requested, or the funding level is predetermined?
So I'll speak for the city of Redmond. The funding levels are not predetermined. I don't know that we've ever said there's a funding maximum. We do encourage people to ask for what you need because this helps us when we go back to our city councils and say, you know, we had $5 million in requests and we only had $2 million to distribute. We need to figure out how to increase our human services budget, but it's not like with federal funding, sometimes, you know, you have to have a 20% match, or you have, you know, So basically, I think the answer is no. No maximum limits, unless any city staff have say otherwise.
Alaric, this is Joy. We also, we do not have maximum limits. We may be looking at having minimum limits for our upcoming funding cycle. So that's something to keep an eye on, just because as our funding level is increasing, we run into a capacity issue there. And the one thing that I will say is that while we don't, we also encourage folks to let us know kind of the funding level that they need. We also want that data, but it is helpful to note within the application if your program model is scalable or not, because when we're making funding determinations, when our committees are making recommendations, it's helpful for them to know if your program is still able to be funded at a different level if we're not able to fully fund your request.
That's a great point. Yeah. So the first thing is, again, going back to each individual city's supplemental information sheet. If they had a maximum, they would put it there. If they have a minimum, that will be contained on that sheet. And all the more reason to talk to the city staff before you make that. Talk to them tomorrow if you have an idea. It's really critical for us to know, if you're asking for $10,000 and we can only give you 5, does that mean the program's not viable? Or can you cut it down by half? So that's a really good point. Thanks, Joy.
Hi, this is Lori from Kent. One thing that I would add is that it's unusual for us. I wouldn't say it won't happen, but it's unusual for us to fully fund a program. We typically look to see that your funding comes from a couple of different sources. And so maybe the program is $50,000 and you might request 25 from the City of Kent, and we will look to see who else is funding the program. So it would be unlikely for us, not impossible, but unlikely for us to fully fund a project.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I always tell people to ask for what you need and don't expect to get it, because there's a pretty good chance you won't get full funding. What else?
Okay, moving, there is a question I would like to get clarification on, but I'll come back to that. So the next question is, will this funding also be able to cover some of the operational costs related to the proposed program? So maybe this is to talk about kind of what some of the eligible line item expenses are.
Yeah, so for many of the cities, we don't differentiate. We pay based on the services provided. So if it costs, $100 to provide, I don't know, an hour of counseling, and $20 of that is for your overhead, most of the cities don't break that out, but Bellevue and who else requires line item reimbursement? And Bellevue, can you explain how that works?
Yes. Yes, we require in your scope of work, if you're funded, there's a line item budget, and you will break down the costs, like, for example, personnel, and then perhaps office supplies, office operating supplies, sometimes utilities. Those kinds of costs can be broken down in another section of the line item budget. And then you do have to submit backup documentation when you submit your reimbursement request to Bellevue. We have a simplified form for personnel expenses because that tends to be the majority of what people charge. But if, for example, you bought office supplies, you'd have to submit a receipt for that, or any other similar charges like that. You would have to justify in some way. We can work with you to make it simpler. Sometimes it can be just a general ledger report that reflects something, but Bellevue does require the line item budgets.
And before, I think Kent and Federal Way also required line item.
Yeah, it sounds like it's Brittany. Is Brittany unable to speak?
Yes, she can.
Hi, this is Lori. We do not any longer we haven't required the budgets to be submitted. for general fund. CDBG is different,
Right.
but for general fund, we do not require that that's submitted.
I did speak with Sarah and Brittany at Federal Way a few months ago, and they have actually, as Brittany can correct me in the chat if I'm wrong, but they have eliminated that requirement to submit backup. So
it's just Bellevue.
We stand alone.
You stand alone. Yeah. But I think the other question was, are they allowable costs? So, and I think the answer is yes, you just need to break them out. Is that correct?
I would say yes, but also talk to staff if you're going, anywhere that's beyond kind of personnel, office supplies, utilities, anything that gets a little too much in the weeds or unusual, please speak to staff first.
Yep. Okay, great.
If I could add from the City of Auburn, we do have some situations where we ask for additional financial documentation, and that's really specific to if you are receiving other funding from within the City of Auburn outside of the Human Services team, or if you are leasing space from the City of Auburn, we do need to ask for some additional financial backup to ensure that you're not using city money to pay the city for those expenses. So if you have a question about either other funding that you might be receiving from other teams in the city or ways in which you're connected to our city that have financial impacts, please just reach out to us and we'll let you know what additional paperwork we would need you to complete.
Great.
So the next question is, why do different cities have different stats? For instance, City X requires 2 hours of case management per resident, where City Y requires 5 hours of case management per resident. Is there a reason different cities use different numbers? Since Share One App is a shared program, shouldn't the cities share based statistical rates? So I don't know if this is kind of maybe somebody wants to talk about how your act should be proportionate to the residents that you propose to serve. I think that's what the question is getting.
Okay. Yeah, so I don't know that cities require, certain number of hours per client, but
Alaric.
Yep.
This is Leslie. I was just going to say, I think the problem that we see more often is that agencies are asking some cities to provide more services or to pay more for a service, and they're asking
same amount,
another.
Yeah.
So you should not be asking City of Bellevue to pay $200 for an item and then City of Kirkland only $100 per item. So that's what we see. We don't require something, but we are looking for proportionate and consistent, and that numbers that make, if your program costs a certain amount and you have a formula for finding out what your the cost of a service unit is, that it needs to be consistently used.
Yeah, I think that maybe that's what the question was getting at. If you shouldn't be asking Bellevue for $200 to provide 1 hour of counseling and giving Kirkland the same, also 1 hour of counseling, but they're only paying $100. 200, yeah. So it should be roughly the same based on what your cost of service is. I hope that answered the question.
Though certainly we recognize that there are situations in which it might be costlier to provide services within a city, especially if you have a base in one community and going into a new community might require additional staff time, additional travel, or leasing space in that community that's more expensive. So we would just ask that in your budget narrative that you just explain if there's whatever the justification is or rationale for why there might be a cost differential between cities.
Yeah. Perfect.
The next question is, can funds be used to support an existing program, or do these need to be new programs?
Existing programs are great. You've already got service data. Yeah, it doesn't have to be new programs. This information session was geared just towards agencies who've not received city funding in the past, but yeah, new programs, existing programs. Some cities like to see a program that has been going on for a little bit. And again, it varies by city, so look in the supplemental information sheet because they'll say, oh, you know, we only fund programs that have been in existence for at least a year or something like that.
I believe it's the last question, but please continue to put questions in the chat and we will try to get to them. And I'm going to go through and make sure that we've answered the ones that have been asked so far. The next question is, if an organization serves community in multiple cities, do we need to determine how much money we are seeking from each city?
Yeah, because Auburn is not going to pay for services to Federal Way residents. You know, if there's a little bit of overlap, that's inevitable. But if you know that 50% of your clients are from one city and 25% in another city and 25% from the other city, I would take the program cost and chop it up and make it proportional. So, you know, our program costs $10,000. So I'm going to ask this city for 5 and them for 2,500 and 2,500. So yeah, but I mean, the good thing is that it's the same application and it just in the budget, you would put the different amounts of ask in there. So it's just one thing that you're filling out instead of 3 with 3 different timelines and 3 totally separate sets of requirements.
Can I jump in here really quickly, Alaric?
Mm-hmm.
This is Stacy from the city of Tukwila, and this is why collecting data is so critical. So in South King County, there are at least 4 cities that share zip codes, including unincorporated parts of South King County. So because of that, when new agencies come to the city of Tukwila, if we are considering your application, we're going to want you to redact personal information. We're going to want you to give us a street address, not a unit number, and the city and not the zip code. We cannot tell residency by zip code. And last funding cycle, I had an organization who said they served 112 Tukwila residents. And when they were able to provide the actual addresses, they only served 2 Tukwila residents. And so we don't want people to think they believe, and even residents believe they live within our city. So it's really critical to make sure that the data that agencies are collecting around residency is really critical, especially in the Skyway, Renton, Tukwila, SeaTac, Burien, Normandy Park, all of that. It's really important to have that information confirmed, and we are happy to help do that, number one, or tell you where to look to get addresses specifically confirmed through the King County Parcel Viewer to ensure that your data is correct, because that's really, really important.
That's true, yeah. We're fortunate here on the east side that for the most part, we just go by zip codes because you can pretty much tell what city they're in just by the zip code. But yeah, for those South County cities with the confusing zip codes that overlap city boundaries, and so talk to Stacy if you have any questions about that and she will work with you to figure it out.
So one question, and maybe it wasn't clear, but about city contacts for contracts. So the same list of cities that was in the presentation for the application, those are the same contacts for your contracts. So that list of city contact is also on showanapp.org. Yeah. And then there's a request to put the slide back up with the timeline. Is that something you can share, Alaric?
Okay, am I still sharing my screen, Chip?
Yes, and I haven't taken it live yet. Your camera's on now.
There we go.
Okay, hang on.
Is it? Yep.
And it's live.
Okay, thank you. So again, the RFPs come out in early March, and then you have 4 weeks at least to work on them and submit them online, and then we review them through the summer. Recommendations made to City Council in the fall, and then they get passed usually with the entire city biennial budget end of November, early December, and then you start up right away. So that's the timeline. So you've got probably about 6 months to get in contact with city staff, to start thinking about data collection, get your questions answered before the actual RFP comes out. So I really encourage people to contact city staff and set up meetings with them. And the good thing is now we're doing everything by Teams and Zoom. You don't have to drive all over the place. So if you're meeting with multiple cities, that makes it easy. And actually, I know that when I have met with some organizations, I've tried to coordinate with other cities that they're interested in applying to, so that we just do one meeting. But yeah, anything else?
We try to do that in South King County too, Alaric, and the same for our contract meetings. So we want to support and make it as easy as possible. And we do have some nuances between city, but we really do our best to coordinate with each other around that.
Yeah, great.
So another question, a great question. What kind of support do cities provide to awarded organizations during the contract period, such as communication support, technical support check-ins, reporting, data collection, program evaluation, language translation, etc.?
Good question. Would anybody like to take a stab? I see no hands being raised. I don't see any hands. So in terms of, okay, so you said language translation is up to you. Most of those things we don't do. We will work with particularly new or smaller organizations, especially when you're, it's your first time around, to help you figure out how to do the data reporting, that technical aspect of that. But the rest of the stuff, like, capacity building, translation, is kind of on your own. But if it's part of your program, I would budget for that. Now, there has been some discussion around ongoing capacity building for organizations, but right now there's, I think, nothing definite yet. Bellevue, is anything definite yet?
One second.
Hi. Oh, yes. This is Alex O'Reilly. We actually are working with Communities Rise, which has been, I believe, one of the representatives at least is on the line today, and we don't have a contract with them yet, but we will be by the end of the year be able to start a partnership with them on the east side to do some very in-depth capacity building that we're excited about, and we'll be able to announce it after probably a couple more months. So yes, that is in the works, but we'll be sure to announce it to agencies when our contract is ready. So
Great.
Thank you for mentioning that.
And in South County, I know you've done some things in the past. Do you know of any plans for the next biennium?
Hi, this is Lori. I would say we don't have any specific plans yet, but cities do offer some technical assistance during the process to create the application. We also, so I'll just speak for Kent, we've been planning to do more capacity building. So we'll work with an agency around reporting, and we'll have a workshop before the first reporting would be required. So we're doing things like that. And recently, Dinah, with one of our more recent grants, did a capacity building workshop around reporting. So we do work a little bit with agencies, but we don't have a specific plan for the upcoming application cycle yet.
Great. I hope that answered that question. Who else?
So we have 2 more questions. One is there potential for multi-year funding from this RFP? Did we clarify how many years are covered?
Yeah, 2 years. And we would love to do more than 2 years, but we can't because our budgets are only for 2 years. So you apply, if you get awarded, your contract starts on January 1st, 2023, and it goes through December 31st, 2024. So a 2-year contract.
So this question, and I know we only have a few minutes left, so hopefully we can answer everybody's questions. If we do get more and are not able to answer them, we will certainly follow up with everybody offline. If people can include their name and emails in the chat, we can follow up with you, or you have our city's emails contact. So please reach out to us if your questions have not been answered. But this one is from Selby, and it's a question about 2-on-1 referrals. So most service providers use 2-on-1 as a referral program, but then all funding is city-based. And the question is about how do they account for city-by-city data since they don't have their data from King County in advance. I don't know if any of the cities on the call understand that question, and if not, we could follow up with Selby offline.
So if I can jump in with a couple of thoughts. Leslie, did you want to?
You're fine. Go ahead.
Okay, this is Joy with the City of Auburn. I think that there's kind of a couple pieces to this question. One is within the application, we ask for some kind of historical trend data, and that's often really helpful to be able to gauge, even if you might have fluctuations through the year, kind of what would be a reasonable service unit per city based on your trends over time. And so a lot of times that can come from just looking kind of year over year. You might have ebbs and flows throughout the year of where referrals are coming from, but oftentimes there's kind of a base average out depending on which cities you're seeing. So I would encourage you to look at as much long-term data as you might have for your program, and that might not be available. So I think the other piece that's an option is really to check in with the cities about what types of service units make the most sense for what you feel you can confidently provide through your program. So for example, in Auburn, we've worked with some providers that really don't have a lot of opportunity to say kind of who's going to access their program when they have a bed available, for example, but they've provided other opportunities for service units, such as if they have contact with a resident in our community, even if they don't have an open space, maybe they're tracking a successful referral to connect that resident with another program. So ultimately, we're still arriving at the same conclusion of somebody having a bed to go to that evening, even if it's not within your program. There are ways that you can kind of talk with the city that you're interested in applying to about how to apply in a way that makes sense for the data that you track and the types of referrals that you get.
Great. Leslie, we have just like 2 minutes left. You want to jump in?
I would just add that if there are programs that you're doing where you don't have control, if you're part of a regional system, for example, shelters or housing sometimes are part of regional systems, then you definitely want to talk to cities, because there are kind of the east side came together to kind of work on a solution for that. So we're paying into a system, not necessarily paying for specific bed nights for our residents. So definitely reach out. But you definitely want to have that conversation ahead of time and not make assumptions without speaking to city staff.
Great, thank you. Brooke, do we have one more question?
Only one question left. So
good, perfect.
Everybody, yes. So this is a question about if you're a 501(c)(3) that works outside of the country, can you receive funding?
That's never come up before. Anyone have an idea? I guess it depends on what the service is too. Why don't you contact the city staff and we can talk about it more? How's that? And again, my broken record thing is contact city staff, talk to them, get all your questions answered, because there are, lots of nuances and variations. So please contact us and we'll work it out. Okay. I committed to start on time and end on time, and it's 6:30 now. So I would like to thank everybody, all the city staff who've come on here, our amazing technical wizard behind the curtain, making this all possible. If you have other questions, please do contact city staff. The PowerPoint will be posted on the shareoneapp.org website, as well as a recording of this presentation in the next couple of days. So thank you and good night.
And
Thanks, Alaric.